Have you ever wondered why some seemingly successful businesses end up failing despite making profits? Are you curious about the common pitfalls that lead to the downfall of a business? By learning from the mistakes of others and implementing effective strategies, you can navigate challenges and position yourself for sustained success in today's competitive landscape.
Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining me today. If you missed my last episode and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on my social media pages as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. And if you'd like to receive notifications on when my podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. David Safir is a globally recognized expert in cash flow optimization and the founder of David Safir International. He advises company owners on cash flow and profit maximization strategies. His work has impacted hundreds of businesses with revenues from 1 million to 20 million in 40 countries. David now teaches business owners and the accountants that serve them how to manage cash flow through his cash flow courses, advisory certification program, and mastermind groups. David is a contributor to CFO.com and a contributing author to CFO University. He has been quoted in hundreds of news stories, spoken to audiences internationally, and appeared on dozens of podcasts and various television outlets. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Candy. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
It's an important discussion for sure. I know I try to educate people on cash flow and the difference between cash flow and profit and all of that too. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation. But before I get into questions I have for you, I'd love for you to just share your story and how did you begin working with businesses and helping them to understand the cash flow that they need to really pay attention to?
Great question, Candy. I had an exposure to cash flow really early on in my career when I worked for my father. I was actually in IT, nothing to do with bookkeeping or accounting, and his business was in trouble. Mm-hmm. And he and his controller had a one-page spreadsheet. I mean, there wasn't multiple spreadsheets, nothing fancy, which was just a column of revenue coming in today, expenses going out today, and then what the balance will be at the end of the day. And they had one per day, every single day going out a few months. And I thought everybody did that. Well, lo and behold, it's not the case. And fast forward 30 years, and I'm put out on a consulting job. And the client said, David, I don't understand it. My accountant told me I made $250,000 last year, which is pretty good for $2 million in revenue. But I don't have any cash in the bank, and I don't know how I'm going to make payroll in 2 weeks. And that was my job, figure out how he's going to make payroll. And fundamentally, I had to figure out where the cash was in his business, and we did. We found gobs of cash that was buried in his business. And subsequently, I've just kept educating myself. Now I've got 200 plus strategies and tactics for managing and optimizing cash flow. And I'm sure in the next year, I'll be up to closer to 225, 250. There are just so many ways to do it. And most people don't know how to do this. Most accountants, business owners, etc. Right. They're just a little bit lost, a little bit blind on it.
Right. Well, a lot of people just really don't even understand the difference between profit and cash flow. And they'll say, well, how is it that my P&L says that I have profit if there's no money in the bank, right? And understanding that is really important. So I would love for you first to even talk about then, why are profitable small businesses failing?
Well, that's a great question, and you've got a good business background.
Hmm.
And when we talk to accountants and to other bookkeepers, advanced bookkeepers, everybody's seen it where the owner treats the profit like a piggy bank.
Hmm.
And let me give you a generic answer: hidden transactions.
Hmm.
And that's number one. Number two is timing. Can I explain what the two mean?
Hmm.
So, hidden transactions are things that don't show up on the P&L but drain your bank account. If you're a manufacturer, if you purchase things for inventory, it doesn't show up as an expense. If you are a business owner and you go out and buy a $70,000 vehicle and you keep it inside the company, it shows up as an asset, not as an expense. If you
Hmm.
give the money to yourself, it shows up as a distribution, not as an expense. When we repay loans, it goes out as a capital return. When this one's a really hard one for people to understand, not as an expense.
Hmm.
So all these hidden transactions is one. Any questions so far?
Nope.
Nope.
Hmm.
Number two is timing. Because when we look at both cash flow and a P&L, it covers a period of time.
Hmm.
So when that first client of mine handed me his P&L, it was for a 1 year period. Well, during that same 1 year period, I didn't know what the cash flow was. And it's easy to measure cash flow. It's simply the amount of cash you've got at the beginning of one period and the amount you have at the end of the period. And the difference is cash flow.
Hmm.
And whether it's up or down, it goes both ways. But you could be extremely profitable for the year, but actually lower your cash. And
Hmm.
so there is a complete disconnect. And I know one of the things you like to do is talk about compliance.
Right.
Unfortunately, our standard compliant reports do not educate a business owner on cash flow. There's a third report, not balance sheet, not P&L, it's sort of the two put together, which is called a statement of cash flows. The problem is it's really hard to read, and
Hmm.
I have to educate myself almost every time I read it. And so it's a bad statement. In my opinion, it confuses most business owners more than it helps.
Hmm. Yep, for sure. Well, it's interesting. I actually did a talk recently at an event and I was explaining this too, like, well, how can you look profitable if you don't have cash? Or how can you look like you're losing money, but you do have cash? And I really talked about the different transactions, just like you're talking about, two things that appear on the balance sheet. And if you get a loan, when that money is infused into your bank account, that's not income. So when you're paying it back, obviously it's not an expense. And if you're an owner taking draws out, obviously you're living off of what the business is providing, but that is not an expense, right? You're taking out equity, and really explaining that and having people think through, like, oh, like that is making more sense now, why cash flow and profit can be totally different. So I think it was just eye opening, I think, for some people, because they don't always learn. When you start a business, you don't always know all of these things. And that's why I'm trying to educate business owners too, and just give them the understanding of what these are. But what are some other challenges that maybe you find entrepreneurs are facing that are causing them to have, less success than they thought they were going to have?
Well, I love accountants, I love bookkeepers, but I find the majority are not well versed in cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're getting bad advice,
Mm.
or they just don't know how to explain it. And so part of what it is do you have a team that can
Mm-hmm.
really help you understand this? So mindset is a big issue, right? One thing is education, which is what we were just talking about, getting yourself educated. But the other part is mindset. If you don't have advisors who have a cash flow mindset,
Right.
then you're in trouble. And the media, everything points to two key metrics in a business. Well, three key metrics, but revenue. You want to fix your cash flow problems, sell more. but yet you and I both know that you can sell more
Mhm.
and you don't get paid for 30 days, but you have two payrolls that have to take place on people who are working on that business. You can dig yourself into a bigger hole selling more faster. And quickly growing companies have bigger cash flow challenges than companies that are shrinking slowly.
Mhm.
So there's the education part and understanding. There you go. Understanding your growth needs versus your cash needs.
Right.
They don't understand that.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Um,
as you're talking, it reminds me of someone that came to me at one point too that said our business is growing. We were, a $2 million company and a $4 million, then six, and we're estimating we're going to be 10 this year, but there's no money in the bank to show for it. Like, what's going on? And so we really looked at everything, and I found quite a few things. Yeah, your revenue is going up, but you're not looking at the bottom line. Your labor is just increased significantly, or just different things that they weren't looking at. They were just looking at the top line number, like, oh, yes, we're growing, but it was
revenue,
costing them
revenue.
more. And I found that the most profitable year was the year that they had the least amount of income in terms of the amount of data I had at the time,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't realize that their expenses were just growing even at a higher pace than their revenue was. And so the money was disappearing, right? So I think, like you're saying, it's important to really look at all of this information and understand. And I actually help them with some cash flow planning too, and looking at, you've got payroll every 2 weeks, and you're, like I said, and his customers, it's construction. And so they'd get like a deposit, but often they didn't get paid till
Yeah,
later, and they're working with government. And so that's even like sometimes 90 days. And so really knowing when the cash was coming in was super important to be able to
right.
maintain paying those bills.
Well, and there's the system you can put into place as a cash flow model, which is completely
Mhm.
different than standard accounting. And putting in a model that uses the past to predict the future, but it also does a second thing for you. When you have a prediction model that says you're going to be short on cash in a month or 2 months, you
Mhm.
actually have time to react and take proactive decisions on how
Right.
you're going to spend cash, try to bring cash in, and what you're going to do to change your business. So
Mhm.
that is a concrete thing that, in my opinion, every company should have. As a matter of fact, I think one of the ways to solve the problem of failing businesses is to focus solely on cash flow or heavily on cash flow. You have to have revenue,
Mhm.
but to sort of forget about profitability. Because if you are cash flow positive, you can stay in business forever.
Mhm.
And you and I can both figure out ways that a company can keep losing money year after year after year, but yet they're cash flow positive, especially on accrual based accounting.
Right.
So if you just focus in on cash flow, a lot of companies would be safe and they would thrive.
Mhm.
Um, there's going to need to be a fundamental shift in what's taught at business school and accounting school and bookkeeping for that to ever happen. But
Mhm.
if somebody's listening right now and they're having problems with this area, shift your focus over to cash flow. Put
Mhm.
into place a cash flow model and figure out how much money is going to be in the bank account a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months from now.
Right.
And that will help you. And then you can start fixing the problems.
Mhm. So why do you think people, and I understand it can be complicated and maybe that's one reason, but why do you think people often don't even think about monitoring cash flow, and they're really focused on the balance sheet, the profit and loss, maybe looking at a general ledger, if they've got that detail too. But what do you think is the reason that really people don't really want to look at that cash flow management type of system?
If we're talking about business owners,
Hmm.
it's two reasons. Number one, the knowledge is not generally publicly available. And two, the advisors they're talking to don't know how to do it.
Hmm.
There's just
Hmm.
lack of information out there. Is it complicated? I don't think so. You don't have to learn any rules.
Hmm.
What are the rules? What's your bank balance today? What is it at the end of the period
Right.
following?
Right.
That's it. It's addition and subtraction.
Mm-hmm.
If you start getting into gross margin prediction, you're using multiplication. You don't even use division. There's no accounting principle, right? I don't. There's no accounting principles
Right.
there, that you have to memorize. There's no mental adjustments. Oh yeah, that doesn't show up here. Everything is self-contained. It's not that complicated. You can create simple models, but there's no guides out there to show them. How do you do
Mm-hmm.
it?
Right. So what would you tell business owners then, maybe who are struggling right now? They don't have the cash, but they thought they're doing okay because again, the P&L says I'm profitable. Like what can they do to help build up cash in the bank to start building up those, reserves? So if something comes along that wasn't expected, or maybe there's an opportunity even for growth that they need to have some funds for, what can they do to start building that up?
Well, very specifically to build up cash reserves. One of your podcasts that I listened to that I enjoyed is Mike, Profit First Mike. I
Mm-hmm.
forget his last
McAllowitz.
name.
McAllowitz. Yeah.
Kalowitz,
Mm-hmm.
right. And so he did a great book that explains it, but it's a fairly simple thing. When you get money in, set aside a percentage of it. Set aside, and you can just have a general fund that you're trying to get up to a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months worth savings so that if there's a problem, you can draw on the savings
Right.
and it can be done automatically. And if you don't want to do it automatically, it takes about a minute to
Mhm.
transfer money from one bank. And that includes logging in and logging off
Right.
to transfer money. Now, that sometimes is easier said than done because people run into problems. Hey, I've got a shortfall. I'll just take it out of savings. They always seem to be dipping into savings.
Mhm.
That's where you need a more formal plan in place, perhaps to do more modeling so you can see those shortfalls coming. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to give the listeners a link so they can get. I wrote an ebook, 10 Easy Habits That Increase Cash Flow Today. These are all
Nice.
within control. Yeah. And so, one of the things that everybody needs to understand is you need to be able to control this. You can control setting money aside, you can control how you do pricing, how you charge people deposits. But too often, the gurus out there, you read an article, and every single mention in the article of a strategy, they're valid strategies, but
Mhm.
they're not within the control of the business owner.
Mm.
Collect money faster.
Mhm.
Gee, that's a great idea. Hey, Candy, do you mind paying my bill? And your response could be, oh, David, I forgot. Thank you for calling me. And that
Right.
happens. Or I didn't realize I have a bill. But at the end of the day, you might say, sorry, I'm paying in 30 days. That's our terms and conditions. Or I'm short. So
Right.
it's you're making the decision at the end of the day. Sell more. Well, again, you're coming to me and saying, David, buy my stuff. And I go, great. How much you want me to buy and what price do you want me to pay for it? And it's not your decision to make, it's my decision. So
Mhm.
you've got to be careful and understand you're looking for solutions that are within your own control. So I'll leave it at that.
Right. Well, you were talking about people say there's all these strategies and a lot of them are not in their control. Do you want to touch on maybe a couple that are in the control of the business owner just to give them kind of an eye-opening experience of this is something you can do to make a change?
Certainly. And we've already touched on one, setting
Mhm.
funds aside. It's totally
Mhm.
within your control. And even opening more than one bank account. So here's another big got you, and that is a balloon payment. Now,
Mhm.
most people don't do loans as a balloon payment, but if you've got a quarterly tax, could be sales tax, it could be any kind of tax, that's a balloon payment. And if you don't accumulate funds for that, then you'll get very often get caught off guard. So there's another one, opening up as many bank accounts as you need, as few as possible. So some other proactive things, looking at inventory and saying, how do I rationalize the inventory? Meaning, if I'm a manufacturer, can I make sure I have as few as parts as possible? Because that allows you to shrink and have fewer parts. You've got 10 types of nails as a builder. Can you go to 8 types of nails?
Hmm.
Because then you can carry fewer nails. The other thing is every company I've ever met that builds things or resells things, they have dead inventory.
Hmm.
Dead inventory is things that are sitting on the shelves, sucking that the cash is locked up. And it's like, put it on sale. Well, wait a minute, I'll lose money. I say, okay, but what's our objective? You're in trouble. You've got 2 weeks worth of salaries right there, payroll,
Right.
sitting on your shelf after a huge discount. But I'll
Hmm.
lose money. Well, go talk to your accountant. In this case, it's a good thing because
Right.
it'll offset profit. Un- free up your free up your inventory. Now, still, you have to find somebody to buy that inventory,
Hmm.
but there are liquidators out there who will buy just about anything for the right price.
Hmm.
And so you've taken away the yes, no, and now it's your decision. Do you want to take what they're offering to you as a purchase price?
Right. Yeah,
Um,
that's a really great idea too, because people, like you said, don't always think through that and thinking, oh, well, I am going to lose money on what I'm selling. But if it is bringing money in and it's not selling anyway, it's sitting on your shelf, right? Then do something
right.
to actually bring that money in for cash flow purposes. So I think that's important to think about, because I understand you don't want to have a loss per se in kind of your logical thinking, right? Like, no, we want to be profitable. But again, what's more important in the long run, to be profitable and go out of business, or have the cash flow, maybe have a loss, but again, you can continue on. So great
I'd say
point
it's
on
more
that.
more important in the short run also. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, if you're talking about a company has really got to do something, they need to make those decisions. And you know what else? There's carrying costs, there's hidden costs of
Right.
not doing this, right? So let's say this takes up 5% of their warehouse.
Hmm.
Well, how much does warehouse space cost? And so there's a hidden cost. And then I had one manufacturer who they had to move things around. They were really tight on space. So they were constantly moving dead inventory, and it was costing them manpower hours as
Hmm.
well. And so there's a multiplier effect when you get rid of some of the stuff. Can I give you one more
Oh,
idea?
sure. Hmm.
Okay. So one of the big write offs is buy a new vehicle.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, but that's fine, but it actually costs you cash to buy a new vehicle.
Hmm.
So let's get away from vehicles for personal use. Let's go to for an employee. You're buying a car or something for an employee, and they don't need the new car smell. They're not worth it. From a cash perspective, buying used, there's a tremendous discount
Hmm.
that you can buy a 1 or 2 year old car and save 30%. Now, it might be a little bit different today. We were sort of in a weird market, but take
Hmm.
away from cars and say forklifts, computers for average workers who don't need a high powered computer. You look at any piece of equipment, there is a used market out there coming out of corporations, large corporations, who they rotate their stuff. You need a computer every 2 or 3 years, period.
Hmm.
Well, there's a small business owner can really take advantage of these big corporations shedding perfectly good assets well before their time.
Hmm.
That's within our control also.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. I think sometimes people just feel like, oh, I have to have the new thing, or, it may not work the way I need it to, or whatever the reasons are, but it's a discount, right? If you're able to go and buy that. And often it is much better value, and you don't have to worry that it's not going to last, as long as the brand new thing, because maybe it lasts a little bit less time, but still in the long run, the cost for the amount of time you're using it is a better price, right?
Absolutely. And you can get refurbished equipment with guarantees that sometimes are
Mhm.
better than the original manufacturer guarantees. I'm thinking computers now. There's people set up to do this with 1 year warranties versus 30, 60, 90 days. Why? Because the new guys want to upsell you. And
Mhm.
with the used computer dealers, oftentimes it's built in.
Right. Exactly. Is there anything else maybe that you wanted to share as a tip to the listener that I didn't think to ask?
Well, I guess number one is focus on mindset first. It's a
Mm,
hard habit to break, shifting away from sales and profit to cash flow and looking at cash flow.
mm,
Um, know the number, know that you've got to find the right accountant. You got to find, or the bookkeeper, advisors who can help you with this if you're a business owner. And if you are an accountant listening to this, whether internal or external, a fractional accountant, know that there's resources out there. You can look at my website, you can look at LinkedIn articles, and really start getting a feel for what I'm talking about if this sounds totally strange to you.
mhm. Yeah. I think, like I said, it's just getting that education. A lot of times, business owners have a passion for something. They start a business and it's hard enough just to get the basics and understanding a P&L, or, maybe they have to get a loan and the bank is asking for a balance sheet. And that's something that they're just learning about what it means, so adding in this cash flow management, sometimes things that they don't think about right away or haven't had a lot of experience. So that's why I think it's important to have these conversations to really
Yep.
expose them to, like, what are the things that you need to know to help you be successful? Because too many businesses are starting but failing. And I want to help change that. So I'm so glad that you were here to talk on this topic today. So as we come to the end, I would love for you to share, is there an offer that you would like to give to our listeners? And also, if someone wants to reach out and connect, how can they find you?
That's both great questions. Yes. So I told you that I have an ebook, 10 Easy Habits that increase cash flow today. And you can find that at CIC60.com. C is in Charlie, C is in Charlie, 60.com. And you'll sign up for that and you'll get a download. If for some reason somebody wants to talk to me, go to my website, cashisclear.com. That's cash is clear, CLEAR.com. And there's a button there. You can just schedule some time with me and we can have a great conversation.
Mhm. Perfect. Well, thank you, David, for being a guest on my show and talking about this topic. I think it's very important. So I'm so glad that we did have this discussion and that you're able to share some of the tips that you can offer to our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate being here, Candy.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview. And remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, AB&P is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.